Hey guys, Sydney here. So in the last video, we saw how we can fetch these products from our database. And if you can just go ahead, so we already logged in. So if we just refresh, and we saw how we can output that product and everything. So if we can just go back, what we want is that if we click on this title of the product, we want it to navigate us to the product detail page. So to do that, we'll need to create a product detail component. So I went ahead and created a product detail component, and I just wrote this or what you can do is if we clear that out. So I have an extension installed, and it is, if you can just go back and look at that extension, and if you just type in React, so you can see I have this extension React ES7 React / Redux. So go ahead and install that extension if you're following along. So I can just close that and return back to the folder there. And what this extension does, it allows, or it gives me some shorthand shortcuts that I can use to write the basic component layout. So if I just type RCE and hit enter, you see I get this basic layout. Or if you're using a function-based component, you can just do RFC and hit tab, and it is a function-based component. So since we'll be fetching data, I'm going to be using a class-based component there. So I'll get rid of export there, and inside here we want to fetch the exact product. So if we just bring this component into our roots, so inside our roots we can import the product detail. So product detail component there, and we can add another root. So if we just copy that, and that goes to /product, so product slash, and then we want the specific ID of that product, so /product/ID, and it uses that component there. And to make sure that we don't have any roots being matched, we can just add exact in front of that. So go ahead and close your roots there, and if we just type in anything here, let's say this is the product detail, so product detail like that, and if we come back and refresh, so if we go to /product/maybe 1, we see we are getting that component being rendered out there. But to make sure that we are getting that component being rendered, I'll change this to a React, so JavaScript React there, and I'll just add a bunch of h1 there. I'll cut that, paste it there, and let's do a bunch of them there. And if we come back, now we see that that component is rendering out correctly, and we can just copy from the home. So if we copy everything else in here, copy that and paste it there, and this should be our product list. So if we go to our roots, the component is product detail, so product detail, not product list, so product detail there. Copy that, go back to the top, paste it there. So we want it, this product list URL we are going to change. So if we just come back and refresh there, we see we are getting that product because we are still fetching from the product list URL. So to fetch a specific product, we'll need to go back to our serializers and create a serializer for that. And in the product detail page, remember it is where we want to display the variations of that specific product. So we can go ahead and create serializers both for this item variation and the variation. So I can go ahead and say the class, this should be the variation serializer. So variation serializer, it is going to be serializers.model serializer. So it is going to be a model serializer. Then we can go ahead and specify class meta there, and our model, it is going to be the variation, and fields, if we just go back to our models, so catalog and models there, the variation. And since we are here in the models, since we'll be adding a specific item to the cart with the specified variations, all we need to do is to add an item variations field to this order item model here. So we can just say the item underscore variations. It will be a many to many field. So models dot many to many field with the item variation like that, and this needs to be the Y. So many to many field with the item variation, so that one product can have, we can add many variations of a single product to the cart. So once we have that there, if we go back to our serializers, the fields, we, for the variation, we'll just have the item and the name. So and we already have the item being serialized here, so we don't need to pass in the item in that there, because we'll have the data of that item anyway from higher up. So I'll just keep it as the ID, and don't forget the ID, very important. So the ID and the name, and then I'll go ahead and create the item variation model. So this is the item variation. We can just add detail serializer so that we can know it is for the detail page, detail view I mean. So the variation detail serializer, and inside the item variations, the model is going to be the item variation. So item variation model there, and make sure we have imported them, which we have. So the fields that will specify on the item variation, it will be the variation, the value, and the attachment. We can copy that, and the fields, so I'll just paste them there. And make sure we are putting commas at the end, and I'll get rid of the name. And to make sure that we don't get the actual primary keys of this variation field there, because it is a foreign key to that variation model, we can add a get variation model. So to get that, we need to specify the variation as a serializer method field. So copy that and specify the variation, which is just going to be a serializer method field. And down here you can define the get underscore variation, which just takes in self and object, so self and object there, and we'll return the variation detail serializer of that instance. So variation detail serializer, and in there we want to pass in object dot variation, and we want to access dot data at the end of that. So object dot variation, then we access data at the end of that. So everything else looks fine, and inside our views, so if I can just close catalog, inside our API views we can create an item detail view. And so this is item detail view, which is just going to be a retrieve API view. The permission classes we can leave as allow any. The serializer class, we will be using the item detail serializer. So we haven't created the item detail serializer, so I can just copy this one right here, copy that, and at the bottom, so this is going to be the item detail serializer, and category we can leave as that, model as the item, and then we'll add another field which are the variations there. And so to access the variations which are just linked to the variation model here, we'll need to get all those variation instances. So to do that, we'll add a serializer method field, and for the variations, so define get variations, and for that we'll return the item variation detail serializer. So we can copy that, and we'll return the item variation detail serializer and say object dot variations. So object dot variation underscore set dot all, and we need to pass in many equals to true because one item can have many variations. So many equals to true there, and at the end we access dot data, the end there. So now we can bring this item detail serializer, copy that inside our API views. We can bring in the item detail serializer and use that there, and the query set we can leave it as it is. So save everything, and inside our product detail, when we are fetching the data, we need to fetch from the product detail URL. So to do that, inside our views, we already created the product detail view. We can copy that, we bring that into our URL, import it there. We have our product detail, and I'll duplicate that, and we saw that we need to go to slash product, and in here, since it is a detail page, we need to pass in just the primary key of that instance and use the product detail view as view, and the name we can just give it as product detail as that, and add a comma there so everything looks fine. So product slash primary key, and inside our constants for the product detail URL, so product detail URL, it is going to fetch the product. So we saw it is fetching from product, then the ID of that product. So we need to add that dynamically and specify ID. This means that this product detail URL needs to take in an ID, so we specify ID there, and so this is going to be a function that takes in the ID. If we save everything, cool. So we need to bring that product detail URL inside our product detail component and replace that there. So we'll paste that there, and so when we are fetching our item, this is a single item, so handle fetch item, we will fetch from the product detail URL, and from the state we'll set the data as the responsive data and catch any error if we have any error. And in here, instead of returning a, so let's just go and see if we are fetching that data. And we are getting that error because in the component did mount we specified handle fetch items, which needs to be handle fetch item like that. So there was an error with the submission, and so for the error, if you can just come back and inspect, and we seem to be getting a lot of errors. So if we go to the bottom there, we are not getting any data being returned to us. And we are getting that error because the product detail URL is a function, so we need to just pass in the item ID. So I can close that first, and just above the render method we can console log the parameters or the props. So when we fetch the item above here, we can just say console.log the props. So we can say console.log this dot props there, and if we come back the product detail for the props, you can see we have access to the match parameter there, the match, and inside the params we have the ID, so we can extract that ID from match.params. So above the handle fetch item, we can say const match, so it was match, and then we need to access params from match, so that comes from this dot props. So inside here, when we are passing the product detail URL, we need to just pass in params, so params.id there, because that is what is specified in here. So if you go to match, if that refreshes and we go to match, we have params and then we access ID right there. So if we fetch that item, we should get the item with that specific ID, and if we refresh, and we are getting this error because there's no item with the ID of 1. And if we can just go back, and on the home page where we have the title, we might just want to add a link so that we can redirect to that specific items detail page. So we can import the link component from React router DOM. So link there, import it from React router DOM, and on the title we can add a link. So link there and wrap it around the title, and we can get rid of .sa, and we can specify a 2 as being equal to, I'll put that dynamically, so product, then slash the item ID, so then item.id. So if we come and test that out, we go back to our products, and now we have the products there. If we click to that, and we should fetch that product. So it is not fetching the exact product again, and it is a server 500 error. So if we can just come back and see what we're dealing with, and the field variation was declared on the serializer but has not been included in the fields option. So if we go to our serializers and where we declared variations, so if we can just add a comma there and save everything, so it is taking time to reload. And if we go back to the home page, we have our chart there, and we're still getting 500. And in the fields option, so we have variation there. If we come back, refresh, also getting 500. So if we look at that error, it is coming from the item variation detail serializer, and it is because the comma should be at the end there. So let everything reload, give it time to reload. So if we come back to the products detail page and we click that, and that should have fetched the product. Variation object has now add variation detail serializer has now attribute variation. Now if we check up the error, it is saying that the variation object has no attribute variation. What we can do is we can go back to our serializers, and inside the item serializers we can add another field here and say that this is the, if you can paste that there, so these are the item variations that link to a specific item. So we can define a get method there, so copy that onto the item variation, and paste that there. So this is going to be get item variations, which is just self and so which is just section self and object, and it will return the item variation. So we can copy that, paste it there, so we can return item variation detail serializer of object dot item variations. So object dot item variation underscore set, so variation underscore set dot all, and we can pass many equals to true, so many equals to true there. And on the item variation detail serializer, we don't need to get those variations because the item variations are linked to the item, to the variation itself. And in here, since we specified the item variations up here, we can copy that and come back, paste it there. And on the item detail serializer, where we were using the item variation detail serializer, we will be using the variation detail serializer, not the item detail serializer. So you can go back there, paste it there. So variation detail serializer of object dot variation underscore set dot all. And if we check the server, it is still running. So if we can come back and refresh, now we are still getting 500 again. So the error is coming from item variation. So object has no attribute item, and that's because I spelled that wrong. So that should be item variation. And since we are not specifying a get variation model on the item variation, we can just get rid of that and check where the ID, put the commas there. Everything looks good. So if we come back to the home page and we click on that specific title there, now this error, it just means that we are getting the data, but the data.map is not a function. But since we are getting a specific object or a single object, which is right here, we see we're getting the item information about that item. We have the variations, and under the variations we have item variations, and we have those three variations there. Inside the product detail, instead of outputting an item list, we can output a card component. So go to Semantic-UI-React and we can check for the card. So add there, and we can make use of, let's say, something like this, where we just need to import the card. So instead of returning an item group, I'm going to return a card. But before we return a card, let's import the grid component first. So grid there, and instead of returning the item group, we can cut that and check how we can output the grid. And we'll need it to be divided. So you can just take something like this, copy that, and we'll return a grid. And for the columns, I can just keep them as 2. And inside the row, we can just have 1 row. So I'll get rid of the bottom row, cut that. And for the columns, we'll have 2. So can cut that, and inside here, so we'll have our variations, and inside the first column is where we'll want to output our card. So you can just go ahead and search for the card component, and we'll start card. So we can copy that back here, and inside, instead of outputting that image, we'll output the card there. Make sure we have card imported at the top, which we don't. So card, make sure we have card at the top there. And if you can just look at the data that we're getting, extra is not defined, so we can just go ahead and fix that. So for the image, we can do the item image. So item dot image like that, and the header, it will be the title. So item dot title. The meta can be the price, so item dot discount underscore price, and the description is the description of that item. So item dot description. The extra can be all this. So if we can just go back to the home where we had the button, we cannot put a button in there, so item extra, so we can copy that, go back to the product detail, and in the extra we cannot put all that. So yeah, let's go and test that out, and we need to log in first. So log in there, and if you go to that specific item, and data.map is not a function, so we can just come above here, and we're getting the data, and we can specify const item. So const item is that data, and if we come back and look at that, so we'll probably need to get rid of the mapping there. So get rid of that and get rid of it there as well. Save everything, and if we come back, now we are getting the return. So we can probably get rid of that return as well. Save everything, and if we come back and refresh, so what we'll need to do is add that add to cart button there. So we can just go back to the item, and what we are using is this in here. So we can just go to try it, and our item extra. So our item extra here had the button, so we can copy that, and inside the extra there, instead of outputting, so I can get rid of that, say extra is all that, and we can change that to add to cart, change the icon to maybe cart plus there, and can get rid of the label. And if we come back and refresh, button and icon are not imported at the top, so we need to import button and icon. So icon there, come back, refresh. Now we have our icon. We can say that this our button, we can specify fluid there, and for the icon, we can say icon and label position, set it to be right. If we come back and refresh, Now it looks like add to cart there, so we just need to put in the variations, and I'll do that with an item list. So back in there, so we have our item, and we can make use of the relaxed one in here. So we can copy that item group, and inside the variations is where we want to return that item group, and we need to say if we have the variations, so data dot variations, and we can get rid of that, then paste it there. So save everything. If we come back, now we have all those three showing there. So we have our variations, then item variation. So we'll need only one item, so we can get rid of, say, all this. So what we can say is data dot variations dot map for each item variation. We will return an item group. So return that item group. We can cut that there, paste it there, save everything, and if we come back, and refresh, now inside the item group you can just say the item variation, or this needs to be variation, so data.map variation.map for each variation. So I can just leave it as v. We will return an item group, and then inside there we can say v variation dot item. So item variations dot map for each item variation. We will return an item. So we can cut that, paste it there, and save everything. If we come back, now we are getting those three items there with the three variations. Now we just need to pass in the keys of those instances. So for our item, the key, it will be iv.id, and for the group, the key will be the variation.id, and inside there for the image source we can output that dynamically and say that comes from http 127.0.0.1, which is just the localhost, or you can just type in the localhost, then slash, then we need to output the variation image, so item variation dot attachment, I believe, so attachment there, then this should be the value of that item variation, so iv dot value. And if we come back and refresh, now we are not getting the images being displayed there, let's see, item variations. So we just need to add attachment there. If we come back, so we need to get rid of that slash there, and if we come back and refresh, now those images are showing. So those are the item variations. Now when we click this button add to cart, we need it to display a certain form where we can choose those specific variations. So we can do that next, and right above or right after the card in here where we have the card, we need to display a form. So the form, and we need to import the form. Make sure it's imported there, and we'll add a form field. So form.field there, and actually I'll add two of them. So form.field button for the last one. So, and inside the button we can just say submit. So submit, and we can say it's primary, so primary in there. And if we come back and refresh, so we have our form showing there. So what we need to do is inside the state we can add a form visible value. So form visible, and set it to false initially. So in here we can specify a handle toggle form, which will just toggle the value of the form to the initial value that it was. So that takes in parameters, and we can say this dot set states, and we want to set the state of we want to set the value of the form visible, so we can access it here. We can access it from the state. So const form visible, we can get it from the state. So equals this dot state, like that, and we want to set the state of form visible to the opposite of what it is. So the opposite of form visible, and this handle toggle form, it is what we will specify on the button here. So we can specify an on click. So on click equals to this dot handle toggle form, and we want to display the form if the value of form visible is true. So we can access that from the state in here. So you can grab it from the state. So form visible comes from the state, and where we have the form, if you can just find it. So in here we can say form, that needs to be that. So form visible and then we'll output the form like that. So we can go ahead and save it. And so if we come back, so if we click that, now we're showing the form. If we click it, the form is not visible. So we can go ahead and add a divider. So above the form, we can add a divider there. So a divider, make sure you auto importing it. So I need it to be a self-closing tag like that, and we need to wrap that in a React fragment. So React dot fragment like that, and wrap that around the form. And if we come and refresh, now we have that divider showing there. So what we want to do is create a select field for every variation that we have, so that when you click add to cart, you have those variations showing up there, and you can select the variations and add that specific variation to the cart. So if we just go back, where you have the form field is where we want to display the select component, and we can use a component from Semantic-UI-React. So a drop down, basically a select component is the same as a drop down, and we can go to usage, and for the controlled one, so if you can just go to try it, we'll need the drop down, and we can copy that, and if we go back inside there is where we want that drop down to be shown, and I'll convert that into a select. And for the options, I'll just leave it as an empty list for now, and the value I can just comment it out. And handle change is a method that we need to create. So under handle fetch item, or just above the fetch item, you can specify handle change. So handle change takes in an event, and it also takes in the name, parameters such as the name and the value of that field that we're changing. And then we'll just want to console log out the name and the value. So console log the name and the value. So if you can come back and refresh, so click add to cart, we see choose an option, and what we need to do is create one of these select fields for every variation that we have. So for, let's say, for example, for size or for color, we will need a select field for color, and if we had another variation, let's say for size, we'll need another select field for size. So what we need to do is come back here, and where we are putting the select field, we can say the data dot map for each variation will output will return that select field. So you can cut that and paste it there, and we can access the name of that variation. So let's say const name equal to variation dot name, and for the name of that select, so name equals to that name there, and for the placeholder we can output it dynamically and say choose a name, which is, let's say, choose a color, so we can close that there, and that needs to be like that. So we can save it, and if we come back, refresh that, and So data.map is not a function. And now we can get the name of that specific variation from the data. So const name equals to, that needs to be const equals to v dot name. So v dot name, now we have access to that name, so that name is the name of this field. And for the options, we want to loop through all the item variations that are associated with that specific name. So we can say v, so v dot item variations dot map. For each item, we'll just return an object, and this object needs to have some properties for it to be outputted properly. And first thing, we need to have the key, which it is just the item dot id, and the text, which is the text which you actually display and choose as an option. It will be item dot value, and when we are submitting that data, we'll need to have the actual ID of that data that we need to submit to the server. So the value of that field, it will be the item ID. So item dot ID, and it is the value which is submitted to the server. So if we save that and we come and refresh, so if we refresh that, we see add to cart, and now choose a color, and we can just say choose the name is v.name dot to lowercase, and say lowercase there. And if we come back and refresh and go up, so choose a color, and then you can choose red. We choose red. Now we get that value console out there, so the name and the value, and we're getting this warning from line 111. So the select, and we can just add a key, which is just the v.id, like that. So if we come back and refresh, now we're not getting that error there. So if we come and choose a color which is blue, so color is blue, and the value of that color is 5. So if we can just go ahead and add another variation, and so let's go to the admin, and for the variation, we'll add another variation. So add a variation for the same product, and the name, let's say it's size, and the value is, let's say, small. We can add another one which is medium and large. And another thing that I noticed is inside our models, so for the attachment field, we specified if we go and submit that data, we'll get an error because for the size we cannot have an attachment for size, so we need to specify blank and null equal as true for this attachment field. So you can say blank and null as true, and we need to go and make those migrations there. So open your terminal and stop the server there. And sorry about this, guys. I'm recording this on a really slow machine, so you can just put up with me because I'm recording it on a laptop Core i3, so yeah, it is really slow, so we need to make those migrations. And it usually takes its time. It's because right now you see I'm running two terminals at once, so usually it takes time. So alter attachment field, yes, we need to migrate and run the server there. So if we come back and refresh, now we add those same, the name was size and the value small, let's say medium, and large. So if we save that, we are not getting any errors. So if we come back and refresh this and click add to cart, you see choose a size and choose a color. So choose a size small, medium, and large. So if I can just clear that and choose a color red and size is medium, we get those values console out. And we can just wrap those select fields into form fields, of which they are. So choose a color and size, and if we are going to submit that data, we need to store it somehow in the state. So inside the state, we'll add a form data, which is going to initialize an empty object. And when we handle change, we need to set the value of that form data. So handle change, we can say this dot set state, and we are setting the value of form data. So form data 2, and in here we can access the form data. So const form data, which comes from this dot state, and when we are setting the state, we want to set the value of so in here where we are grabbing the value of the form data, and where we need to set the state, we can just say const updated form data is going to be an object, and in here we take the form, the spread of the form data, meaning take everything in the form data, and in there just change the name to be the value. So in here where we are setting the state, we can set the state of form data to be the updated form data, like that, and we can save that. And so if we come back and refresh and test it out, so choose a color red and medium, so everything still working. And we might just want to change this a little bit and say the product title, where we are putting the variations, so data variations.map. So where we're putting the image, we can just say if there is an attachment, so let's say iv.attachment and display that attachment. So we can save that, and if we come back, and you see those images are not displaying there for the size, so we can go ahead and proceed. So when we click that submit button, we need to post those values to the add to cart URL. So we can add another method here and specify the handle. So handle add to cart, which is just going to take in a slug, and we we can grab the form data and just console it out to see how it looks like. So const form data, it is going to come from the state. So this dot state, and we just want to console it out and see how it looks. So console.log the form data. So console.log form data there, and this handle add to cart, we can bring it on the button, and in here we can specify an on click. So on click is going to be an anonymous function that will just call this dot handle add to cart, and it needs to take in the slug of that item, which is just item dot slug. So item dot slug, we can come and test that out. So if we refresh, choose a color red, small, and console that out, so we see color 4, size, and 7. So we can't submit this data as it is right now. It's because inside our models, where we specified that many-to-many relationship with that item variation, that if we submit that, it expects an array of primary keys, because when you add a many-to-many relationship, it has those primary keys of those instances. So if we go back to our product detail page, and where we're adding that item to the cart, we need to format the data, excuse me. So we can just save that and specify another method. So handle format, so handle format data, which is just going to take in the form data. So form data, and we'll just return object dot keys of that form data. So object dot keys of form data dot map. For each key, we will return the form data. So return form data, and to get the value of that specific key, we just need to type in key there, and this handle format data, we need to call it on, we can say the variations is handle format data of form data, and in here we can just console.log the variations to see how it looks like. So variations is not defined, and this needs to be a constant. So const like that, and if we come back, handle format data is not defined, and if we just save everything there and come back and refresh, and we just need to call this before that, so this dot handle format data. And if we come back and refresh, now that error is gone. If we choose a color red and small and submit, now we're getting 4 and 7. So when we handle add to cart, so these are the variations that will pass into that add to cart function there. So to add to cart, we need to call access. So access dot post, and we need to post to the add to cart URL. But before that, we need to create that URL. So inside our constants, we can create that URL. So export const, and that is add to cart URL, which is just going to go to the endpoint. So add to cart URL takes in no parameters, and it needs to go to add dash to dash cart, and you can get rid of the ID there. Now inside our serializers, since we linked this item variation model, since we link the item variations to that specific order item, we also need to serialize that order item, because we will be calling it when we are adding the specific variations to that order item. So inside the serializers, we need to create an order item serializer. So order item serializer, I can just copy this one here, copy that, paste it there. So this is order item serializer, and the field that we want is the item variations, because it is a field that is specified here. So we can get rid of that, and the fields that we want, so the model is the order item, and the fields on the order item can have the item itself, the item variations, and the quantity. So we can copy that, and for the fields, I'll get rid of those, paste ours in there. For the ordered, we don't need that. So we have that item, add commas at the end there. So the item variations, we need to define a get item variations, so we can get rid of that there, and this will be get item variations. So get item underscore variation, and we'll need to return a serializer of those item variation instances. So we can create a variation instance, a variation serializer. So copy that and paste it above the order item. This is just the variation, and we don't need that there. The model will be the variation, and we don't need to fetch more data there. So if we go to the variation itself, we have the item and the name. So I'll just keep it as ID and name. So we have ID and name, and we don't need that there. And Since the variation links to the item variation, we can create an item variation serializer. The model is item variation, like that. In the fields inside the model, we have the variation, the value, and the attachment. So we can copy that and paste them there. Can get rid of name there. And since the variation is linked to this variation model here, we can't just return it like this because we'll just get the primary key of that instance there. We need to define a method. So get variation, which just takes in self. So self and object, and we'll return the variation serializer of object dot variation, and pass many equal to true there, and access dot data at the end there. So many equal to true, not many dash true. Many equal to true. Save everything, and this variation will need to specify it as a serializer method field. So paste it there, save everything. So for the item variations, we will return an item variation serializer. So we can copy that, and in here we'll return an item variation serializer of object dot item underscore variations dot all, since it is a many to many field, and passing many equal to true there. So we have everything that we need, and inside our views, so if we come back in the handle add to cart, since we will be posting some user data, we need that data to be authenticated. So inside the source folder, I've created a new folder called utils.py, and inside the utils.py we are posting the token that we set in our local storage together with the data. So instead of just calling axios.post, we need to call this auth axios. So we can close that, and inside here first we need to import the auth axios. So add to cart, we can just call auth axios. So auth axios.post, where our URL is the add to cart URL. So we can just import it. So add to cart URL, and we are posting to the add to cart URL, and in there we're taking the slug of that specific item and the variations of that specific item. So we have those, and that will give us a response. So a response, so then with the response we can set the states. So this dot set states, and set the value of, let's say, loading back to false, and if we catch any error, dot catch error, and we can set the state again. So this dot set state, and the value of error to be this error that we're getting if we actually catch one, and state loading back to false. So save everything, and we just need to make sure that our handle add to cart is triggered when we click that button. So On click, it will trigger that handle add to cart. And since we are passing in the slug and the variation, we need to make sure that our view can handle that. So inside API views, so inside here we can define the add to cart. So class add cart view, which is just going to be an API view, not a list or a retrieve. So it's going to be inheriting from the API view, and we can define a post method which just takes in self, takes in request, and keyword arguments, arguments and keyword arguments. So if we can just go back to our catalog views, this is the pure Django view that we use to add that item to the cart. So in here we get that item, so we just maybe want to copy this logic here. So if we just copy that, post that inside our API views, we can paste that there, and we just need to tab it in. So we can tab that in, and the slug of that item, so slug, we can get it from the request data. So slug equals to request dot data dot get the slug or none. So what we want to check, so we can check that if the slug is none. So we can say if slug is none, then we might just want to return a response. So let's make sure we are importing the response, which we are not. So from rest, so from restwork dot response, we need to import response like that, and you can also import some statuses. So from rest framework dot statuses, we can import some statuses like HTTP 200 OK and the 400 bad request. So 400 bad request there, and if the slug is none, we just want to return a response, and in there we can have a message. So the message is, we can say, invalid data, and for the status it will be the 400. So status 400 bad request. So if the slug is none, we return that. Else, if it is not, if we have the slug, we proceed by getting that object, and let's see if get object of 404 is imported, which it is not. So we can go ahead and import it. So from Django.shortcuts, we can import get object of 404. Now we have that. So if we can just go back, we can get that item, and in here where we are getting the order item and creating it, this we'll need to change this much a bit, because inside the order, the models, remember we specified the item variations field on those order items. So we also need to get those variations there. So we can turn this into a query set and say order item dot objects dot filter, where the item is the item and the user is the request user. And we also want to filter that order item for the specific variations. So we also need to get the variations, and variations, it will be request.data, not double T. So request.data.get variations, and we can just print those variations to see if we are getting them. So print variations there, and we might want to check that if the variations, if we don't get any variations, we will just get an empty list. So for this case, we want to check that, for example, for the product of denim shirt, it has variations of size and color. So for a product like that, the minimum number of variations that it has, it should be 2. So in here where we're getting the item, we can check for the minimum number of variations. So minimum variation count, it can be the variation objects, so variation.objects.filter, where the item is this item that we're getting here, and then we access.count at the end there to get those minimum variations count. And we want to check that if the length of those variations that we got, if it is less than the minimum variation count, that means that we don't have enough variations to validate the add to cart request. So we can come back and specify that there, and we can just say specify the variations like that. So specify the variations and we return that. So if we have those variations, we go ahead and filter that order query set. And since we are having the variations of 1 and 4, we need to, or the variations of, let's say if we go back and just log in here. So if we go to the item detail page, and when we add these variations, you saw that we were adding the primary keys of those instances. So for example, for red it was 4, and for, let's say, medium it was 7. So we need to account for that, and in here we can look through all those variations and say for v in variations, let's say we need to filter that query set. So we can copy that and say that equal to the order item query set equal to the previous query set. Then we filter it again. So we filter where the item variations, remember that is the field that we specified inside our models here. So item variations. So we filter where the item variations _exact equal to the variation that we have. So if we have that variation, then we are justified to say that. So if we have those variations, then we can say that if the order item query set dot exists. So if that query set exists, meaning we are adding a second item to the cart, and we can say the order item. So order item, it will be that order item query set. Then we grab the first item in that query set, so dot first there. And after we grab that item, then it is justified to increase its quantity by 1. So we can say order.item.quantity plus equals to 1, then we save that item. Else, if we don't have, if that order item query set doesn't exist, meaning we are creating a new order item, then it will be exactly like this. So we can copy that and say our order item, it will be order item.objects.create now, not filter. So we are creating where the item is the item and the order, the user is the request user, and we also need to add in those variations. So we can say order item dot item variations dot add, and since we'll be adding a list of variations, we can look through that list and say just add all of those variations and say star variations, and we can just save that order item. So order item dot save, like that. Then after that, we now proceed to the order. We get the order, we filter it on the request user, and where ordered is false, then we grab that first item in the order. In here where we're filtering, where the item slug, the item slug is the item slug, that needs to change because we are filtering it by the if we filter it by the slug, it will defeat the purpose of our variations. So we need to change some of these around and can get rid of that and say delete that. Actually, let me bring it back. So what we want to check is if that query set doesn't exist. So if we filter that order where the item double underscore slug, and that needs to change to the ID of that item, because if we just filter it by the slug, it will defeat the purpose of our variations. So we filter it where the item ID is the equal to the order item dot ID, like that. If that doesn't exist, then we can just say order, we can just say order dot items dot add order item, then we can save the order. So order dot save, like that. And where we're returning the messages, will not delete the messages since we are using the response. So we can copy that, and inside here we can return a response and say the status of that response is a HTTP 200 OK. So HTTP 200 OK. We can save that and get rid of those. Else, we are creating that order on the spot. So the order date is times.now. Then we create that order and that add that order item to the order, and we need to return that same thing there. So we can paste it there, and everything looks fine. So this add to cart view, we can bring it into our URLs and paste it there. So we'll have another path that goes to add to cart and uses the add to cart view dot as view, and we can use the exact same name. So add to cart, paste it there. So everything looks fine now. That is the add to cart. The URL is good. If we go and confirm in our constants, it goes to the add to cart URL, and inside our product detail, where we are adding to the cart, if I can just find that add to cart, and inside there So handle add to cart, we are passing in those variations and the slug. So we can just come and test this out. So inside the admin, currently we have no order items, and if we go to the orders, and we have no orders. So if we just refresh this, and we can add a red and medium shirt. So that seems to be working. And if we come back and refresh, now we have an order there, red denim shirt. So if we go to the order items, and we see we have a red and medium shirt. So if we go and add a different item, let's say a different variation of the same shirt, let's say black and small, we should get a completely different item. So if we go and add to the cart again, and if we come back to the order items, now we see we have two, and blue and small. If we go to the orders, now we have that order and we have those. If we add another blue small shirt, then if we come back and refresh, we are getting an error, and that is just because we didn't specify the keys. So in message detail, product detail line 99, it is because inside the form, inside the select field, where we are specifying the value of that select field, the value needs to come from the form data. So if you can just get the form data from the state, so form data, and if we come back here, and we left that out, so that this needs to come from form data, and we can access the value of this field by just saying form data name. So if we give that time to compile, and it's compiling there, if we come back and refresh, I'll actually go and delete everything. So for the order items, you can delete all of them, and if we go back to the order, also delete that order there. So delete that. If we add to cart a red and medium shirt, add to cart. If we come back to the order and refresh, now if we add another red and medium shirt, so if we check the error, the error that we are getting, it says that object has no attribute. First, yeah, it's because I spelled that wrong. Sorry for those spelling mistakes there. So this needs to be first. So first like that, and that needs to be good. So if we can just come back and reload, I'll actually go ahead and delete everything. Excuse me guys. So I'll go ahead and delete that. If we go to the order items, we have none. If we go to the order, I'll also delete that order. And if we come back and let's say we need to add a red and medium shirt, so it is there. If we add another red medium shirt, we should get two of the same product. So if we go to the orders, now we have two of shirts, If we go to order items, we have 2 of shirt and all of them are red and medium. If we go and add another blue medium shirt, we should see a completely completely different item. So order item, we have blue and medium. If we add another blue medium, then we go to the order items. Now we see we have 2 blue medium shirts. So the incrementing of the quantity works, and everything seems to be working well, although I'm running on a really slow machine here. But I just wanted to put this video around, and as you can see, I just wanted to put this video up in a short time, so you might get some errors here and there, but try to improve it in your project, and everything seems fine. So we can finish off by removing that and touching up some things. So under the submit, inside the product detail, under the button, we have so it is that one there. So if we check, that one comes from the return, but we can say that the button here, where we specify the button, say that the button is fluid, and if we come back and refresh, now click add to cart, now it looks good. So we can just change that, say add. There were some errors with the request, so if we refresh that and click add, so everything seems fine. We can go back to our products, and if we click that, so we can add, let's say, a black large shirt, add, and everything seems to be working correctly. So thanks guys for supporting me and for watching this. So if you like this video and you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell to get notified. So I'll see you in the next video.